So what about, so where else, sorry, besides schooling, where else did you learn about democracy as you understand it now?
Getting involved with different groups and attending running association meetings and general meetings, seeing, when community events would come up, watching how different an event being, let's say, held by city staff would be compared to a community group, and different levels of that. And then, of course, as well, like going to university and reading philosophy, I was also very, very in-depthly at that point. I would say from third year on, I kind of developed a keen interest in political philosophy. And so read a lot about, just the concepts of democracy and all that as well. So I would say by the time I was getting involved with the student strike, I had a very theoretical conception of what democracy is and can be to many people, I would say.
Okay. Which, when you say you're reading political philosophy, like who would you be reading? What?
I'm a big fan of Antonio Gramsci. Big fan of, the guy who wrote Imagining Real Utopias. He recently just passed away just last year.
I don't know that one.
If I ran to my bookshelf, I could name him.
Yeah.
Eric Olin Wright. He was a big influence to me.
Right.
I found I was really drawn to political philosophers who were trying to think of a practical solution and frameworks to then apply to organizing.
Yeah.
And starting with Antonio Gramsci and really, really obsessing over the distinction between the war of position and war of maneuver. Really, like that like opened my eyes. I was like, there's been these thoughts and stuff. So really honing in on things like that. Big fan of, pretty much anyone who probably describes themselves as a Marxist, as well as a strong interest in existentialism and that kind of influencing in it, as well as kind of moved into near the end of my philosophy degree. If I decided not to go to grad school, but if I had decided to go to grad school, it was sort of a toss-up between pursuing more political philosophy and phenomenology. So like Merleau-Ponty was a fan of him as well.
Okay.
Which I think also influences my politics and the idea of lived experience and valuing lived experience. I think really, at that point, like that fourth year university really cemented that as a political value of mine.
Yeah. I use phenomenology a lot, so I know Merleau-Ponty's work. Yeah, it's great stuff.
Yeah, I looked up your bio.
Yeah.
I saw that, yeah.
Yeah. Cool, okay. So you were considering grad school? Was that just a maybe?
I enjoyed academia, but what I wanted to do with it was very, very singular, and I wasn't. My main issues with academia were less so actually reading and studying and writing papers, but was more so the political situation that universities across the world, but in Canada, are kind of in. And I got a little disenfranchised, and I decided to take a year off. And over that year, I made this. It became very clear to me that I didn't want to return. And I still think about it every once in a while, but it was a tough decision to take that year off, and I'm glad I did.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, next question: do you feel as if Canada is democratic? Why or why not?
A little. I think democracy is like it's a scale, right? There's going to be like if someone were to ask me, I would say, we're a fairly representative democracy. I think we could be significantly more democratic, but I also recognize we're probably more on the scale of to least democratic to most democratic. We're probably closer to least democratic, but I recognize that we could be considerably less democratic.
Right. Okay. So on that scale, you would still put us closer to least. In comparison to, like, who in your head is there sort of a comparison to least democratic compared to what's possible, or compared to other countries you could think of? Or?
Perhaps, I would say compared to other countries.
Yeah.
So there are systems, like electoral systems, that I believe are more just fundamentally democratic.
Yeah.
I think there's probably also other regions and countries that integrate democracy more into other aspects of life, so workplace democracy, things like that. So I don't just, when I think about like, is Canada democratic, I don't just think of our electoral system. I also think of the fact that no one really has a democratic workplace. No one really has a democratic decision-making process for local government. I've been a municipal advocate for a while, and I don't think the municipal democracy really exists in any real sense. And then of course, like at the same time, like I do recognize that there are countries that are significantly less democratic by those measures as well, both electorally and not. So
right.
I mean, just on the scale, the U.S. would be less democratic than Canada, but I would probably consider Spain to be slightly more democratic. But I very much try to frame things in terms of what is possible, or what I believe is possible, and not just what it already exists.
Right. Yeah. So I want to ask kind of the same set of questions about citizenship. So when I say the word citizenship, what comes to mind?
The agreed upon legal framework in which someone belongs to a national country. I think that's I've read these questions before, and I don't know if I have a satisfying answer to that.
Okay,
actually,
it's really just yeah. And where did you learn about the concepts of citizenship in school, separate from democracy? I know there's the civics courses, but
yeah, I would say so. I would say citizenship as conceived as national identity and patriotism was definitely taught to me. Significantly younger too. I think of exercises like I guess I was in grade 4 when the Sydney Olympics happened, and I remember very thoroughly learning all about Canada and how Canada relates to other countries and Canadian identity during that time, and that burned into my brain. In other instances like that. So I would say citizenship as conceived as pride, like as patriotism and understanding of what people perceive as Canadian identity in the mainstream sense, it was very much taught to me.
Okay. So where else have you, besides schooling, where else have you learned about the concept of citizenship?
Outside of schooling, don't think I've learned anything about it. I definitely think I kind of learned more about concepts of local belonging and community citizenship, but I don't know, other than developing more of a belief that national citizenship as conceived as I learned about it is sort of a fake concept, in my opinion. I've just kind of grown further apart from that concept as I get older, as opposed to, I don't think I've learned more about what it means to be a citizen of Canada in any real sense in terms of how it was taught to me as a child. I definitely think I've developed a sense of responsibility as someone who is legally a Canadian citizen, and I live here, and I don't plan on moving from Canada anytime soon. And I've developed a strong sense of responsibility to make things better and use that use that legal position I have to the purpose of relieving oppression and suffering, I guess, and fixing things and things like that. But I mean, it's like as the more and more I learn about colonialism, which really, you kind of learn a little bit about Esther growing up, especially since graduating university. And here in Hamilton, like, we're so close to Six Nations, so there's a lot more learning opportunities in that sense. I would say, I don't want to say like I have a more nuanced perception of citizenship than I did, but I definitely have a more complicated relationship to it.
Yeah. Do you feel as if you are a citizen in Canada, and what does that feel like?
I know I am. I don't know if it's a feeling.
Okay.
I think because of I would say the only time I ever really feel a citizen of Canada is when I feel instances of shame and embarrassment. And that's sort of like a kind of building off of like the feeling of responsibility that I have and have developed. But I haven't felt pride or any of the more typical kind of feelings associated with citizenship and recognition of citizenship in a very long time, or if ever in my adult life.
Yeah. Okay. Do you feel as if you are seen as a citizen of Canada by others, by anyone in general, and also by people in power like politicians or the media, but also general public?
Yeah, I do. I just think those in power and those who conceive of what that means maybe just have a different idea of what that is than I do.
Yeah.
And I definitely feel citizenship also in a lot of cases when it comes to issues of power and social power, both like, in terms of media as well. As someone who doesn't own property, I definitely feel citizenship isn't all of what makes someone a full unit in our electoral democracy as conceived by those in power.
So that owning property marks you as a different kind of citizen? Is that a fair paraphrase, or?
Yeah. And not just and again, it's like sort of on a scale as well, where I think as someone who probably has a more respectable job, at least to some, someone who I dress fairly normally, I guess. I'm active, I contribute. Like people see me as contributing, I think. Yeah. I think that maybe to some people they don't care about the property ownership, but I think maybe to a lot of others, I'm still just a renter activist, maybe. Right. So it's not a universal perception. It's definitely very much on a scale forward, depending on who we're talking about.
Yeah. Do you feel as if your views and perspectives are represented through official channels? And again, I'm thinking of politicians and media specifically here.
Yes, but not in any adequate sense.
Okay.
So I don't feel, I'm not someone who feels like I'm alone in this fight, or me and my comrades are alone in that, and that we have no representation. I worked quite hard to get my MP elected, who I think is rad and awesome. But I also have an understanding and recognition that isn't just because he's my MP doesn't mean my political views and values are being represented or enacted by the federal government. Yeah. And at the same time, though, but I also think in terms of media as well, I think I am getting more representation in that sense. I would say especially in the last decade. As I've gotten older, I've noticed that it's not just a matter of me being around longer and having more opportunity to learn about more opportunities to see representation in terms of my political views and things like that, but I definitely think that there has been progress made in terms of having my political views and my concepts and values represented both within the democracy but also within society.
Okay. Could you name some examples of seeing that representation shifting over time? What sorts of issues do you see actually showing up more?
I really think so. Like I became an environmental. Like I've been an environmentalist for a long time, and I've been very concerned about climate change. And in a lot of ways, I think it's just always made sense to me that leftist politics and environmentalism go hand in hand. I see capitalism as inherently an unsustainable economic and political system, and I think really that's catching on in ways that didn't in the past. At least that's my feeling, and I think at least within Canada, for sure. I think in other historical contexts, definitely much more so. But I think within my lifetime, having someone like Matthew Green be my MP, who is willing to say the word socialism in Queen's Park, not in Queen's Park, but in Parliament, is good. I think media, there's been more opportunities for my values and my concept of citizenship to be represented. Both in the mainstream, I would say, very slowly, but also just through avenues of the internet allowing new forms of media and discussion to come about. I would say I'm seeing more of.
Okay, yeah.